Right, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. My name is Tim Huxley, and it's a great pleasure to welcome you all to the Foreign Correspondents Club for another of our Formula One lunches. Looking around this room, I mean, I don't think we've ever had such a bunch of sporting legends in the FCC at one time. Could all of those who have actually raced a car on a track raise their hands? I mean, that's a pretty good participation level. So, thank you all.
Mark, sorry, Mark, can you put your hand down? He's just showing off over here.
And I'm not sure how many of these events that we've done over the years, but they're always one of our most popular, and so it's great to have you all with us. For those of you who are here as guests, a very warm welcome. And there is, of course, so much more to the FCC than just being the home of Formula One in Hong Kong. And I would thoroughly recommend you consider becoming a member and becoming part of the stellar bunch of characters who make up our club. So, moving on to today's event, it's a great pleasure to welcome back Matthew Marsh. Matthew, he's the Mick Jagger of the FCC. He never has a problem packing a stadium. And so it's great to have you back here, mate. And he brings over 3 decades of motorsport experience as a driver, broadcaster, sponsor, hunter, and brand partnership builder, and is a well-known figure in the Formula One paddock who never holds back from airing a forthright view.
Well-known figure at the bar at the FCC.
Well, indeed.
It's my greatest achievement. I want to say thank you to all of you for coming, and many of you have said, it's great, and you're so popular, the room is full. And I think what I want to do is give all the credit, most of the credit anyway, some of the credit, to Tim.
A little bit.
Who back in 2018 said, would you consider doing a lunch event at the FCC? We're trying to generate more revenue from events, and we're thinking an F1 would be a good topic. And fast forward to today, 2026. Formula One's revenues have doubled. It's now a $4 billion sport. Audi have come into the sport, Cadillac have come into the sport, Honda have come back into the sport. Tim Huxley, ladies and gentlemen. Credit for all that. Round of applause for Tim Huxley.
Thank you. I wish the FCC's revenues had doubled. So, anyhow, on we go. We finished the sort of love-in. So, 2 races into the season, and in Australia, Max Verstappen, he described the new breed of Formula One cars as Formula E on steroids. And the new world champion, Lando Norris, said, we've gone from the best cars ever made and the nicest to drive to the worst. And for those 2 in particular, things didn't get much better last weekend in China. Meanwhile, George Russell was effusive in his praise of the new rules, and Lewis Hamilton described the Shanghai race as the best racing I've ever experienced in F1. One respected Formula One publication said, we had proper red meat racing in cars that looked agile, raced wheel to wheel, nose to tail, and were capable of passing and repassing each other. Formula One looked fun again, and maybe we have a season of thrills ahead. Give us the inside story. Is this a case of drivers just need to get used to these new regulations and new cars and energy management, and it will all settle down? Or in a few years' time, we're going to look back wistfully through rose-tinted glasses at the years of Max Verstappen winning 19 races in the season and years of Michael Schumacher domination.
I don't know why.
How's it been?
I don't know why anybody thinks that the previous cars were the best cars ever, because they weren't, were they? I mean, 2025, people called it the qualifying championship. If you weren't on the front, you know, or if you were, that gave you a distinct advantage. So every rule set has its pluses and minuses. And I think it's clear that the drivers, all of them, don't really like the way the cars work at the moment. Because what they want is that when they come on the gas and they want 100% of the energy, they get 100% of the energy. We call it energy today, but the power, you know. And what's happening at the moment is, and I'm just sort of kind of making this slightly up, you know, coming out of turn 3, you get 100% of the energy. But coming out of turn 4, you get 50%, because that's the way the car is optimized to do the entire lap. With the, you know, they're starved of energy. They don't have enough to do the lap full beans. But they have 1,000 horsepower when it's full beans. So, you know, the solution probably, or some of the solution probably, is going to be turning it down so that the full beans is 850 horsepower or something, and then the drivers can have that consistent feel. But, you know, I don't think that necessarily is the racing. If you watch it without... Who watched Australia and China? Who's watched all the races? Okay, great, thank you, most of you in the room. I don't know, I thought the sprint race was... I was watching it without commentary and without graphics, and it looked really good to me. Who thought it looked good? Okay, some of you are okay, 40%. Okay, I'm surprised it's that little, actually. But in this room, it's what I would call probably avid fans. Most of you are people who, we heard about Mark, obviously on track, and his success is there, but, you're avid fans. Whereas I think, and we're therefore a bit more invested in the technology, we care about it more. And when Tim and I first started following Formula One, the news cycle was Wednesday motoring news, the newspaper.
Yeah.
Thursday was Autosport. These are weekly publications. There was Motorsport once a month, a little bit in the newspapers, and hopefully not anything else, because if it was somebody just got killed. That was the news cycle. Today, I was chatting with, John Noble, who's one of the best journalists in Formula One, who's been around forever, great at analysing. I would, tune into John Noble. Actually, people often ask me, so that's one. John Noble, he's now with the race, the-race. And you listen to John talking about this, and I said, how often do you guys do podcasts now? It's almost every day, because they do one in the car for members of their club, and they do, If you're creating 30 minutes of content a day, you have to have things to talk about. So I think it's sort of somewhat overblown the current, lack of perfection in the technical regulations.
Okay, well, the first part of both of those races, it looked pretty good. Lots of overtaking, Ferraris side by side through half a dozen turns in Shanghai. But did you consider that as real racing? And one of the other things that, as you say, there's so much content out there. You recently did an interview on Bloomberg Television, and you said that one of the reasons for F1's explosive popularity is that it has moved from being a sport to being entertainment. Are we focused too much on the entertainment aspect now, or is it a case of the sport's moved on to cater to this new, younger demographic that and are grumpy old men like me who get their kicks out of watching cars sliding around Silverstone in the 70s, are we dinosaurs? Yes.
We?
Well, okay.
And I can answer all of that, but I'm not going to do the first part, which is about entertainment. It's always been entertainment. The reason the avid fans have tuned in is because it's entertainment. What I was trying to say on the Bloomberg piece you referenced was that what Liberty Media understood was it's entertainment. Because if somebody's especially paying to be there with money, but also with their time, then they should be entertained. And that's what it's always been. They understood that, and they've highlighted the entertainment aspect, What I was saying was that I'm not a dinosaur. We're not dinosaurs. We're the core demographic. We're the 500 million of the 830 million fans that make the sport attractive to the other 300 million. They have to go motor racing, these gladiators, for them to be attractive to people like my daughter, who doesn't want to watch a race. But that doesn't make her any less valuable, doesn't make her wrong. She wants to know what Charles Leclerc is doing and who he's driving for and who he's sponsored by, importantly, and who he's getting married to and where he lives, all of those things. And how did he do in the race? She wants to know that. And that's not wrong, that's great. And it's one of the things that Formula One has, either uniquely or unusually, is this sort of behind-the-scenes concept and content that you can show on television. And what would you show for other sports? It's not, the locker room of a football match. Ooh. That might be attractive to some people, but you get my point.
Okay, yeah. But is that enough? When you and I started going to Formula One races in the 70s, there'd be on-track action with maybe 7 or 8.
There's a murmuring over here of Matthew couldn't have been there in the 70s. He couldn't have been there.
And you had all the support races and everything, and it was a day full of motor racing action. Nowadays, there isn't that.
There is that.
Is that?
There is. There was actually the F1 Academy race, which is, as you might know, is the single-seater series for girls, and is a whole initiative by Formula One to attract females into the sport, obviously as drivers, but also the rest of the ecosystem, whether that's as engineers or whether that's in the marketing or whether that's in finance of the business. I haven't thought the racing's been very good at all the last couple of years, but I was watching it and thinking, this is actually good. That's interesting. And that was the whole point of starting that. Anyway, that's a whole other story. But the point is, there was that, there was the Porsche Carrera Cup race, and there was a GT4 race. There was quite a lot of action. It's not the same as going to a non-Formula One event where, understandably, the promoter needs to put on event, but for a Formula One event, quite a lot. and the fan zone was packed. And, you know, again, there's the on-track and the off-track. And the off-track, the F1 licensing people, I was having a chat with them, I understand the licensing, merchandise sales have doubled in China in the last year. The F1 movie may be the reason. It was one of only a few movies, foreign movies, that was allowed to be shown in China. That's great for Formula One. It's an important thing. I didn't actually understand what I was being told. I had to get somebody to translate it. They've got a partnership with Disney, that bit I understood. But all the plushies had sold out by Friday. I don't know.
What's a plushie?
A plushie is a soft toy. But it has sold out on a Friday afternoon. That doesn't happen typically. I heard a scream, a lady's scream in the paddock, and a girl rushing like this with her phone. Ah! And I thought, what's happening? Because you don't normally see people screaming and running in the paddock. And she managed to have a selfie with Yuki Tsunoda. You know, but that's great, right? Because if she's excited about seeing Yuki Tsunoda, imagine if she was to get a photograph with Lewis Hamilton. So it's good.
But not many people get access to the paddock now. I mean, so has it become quite elitist in that respect?
No, it's much less elitist than it used to be because there's a lot more people in the paddock. It's busy now. And that kind of screaming thing, I mean, Bernie wouldn't have allowed typically women, certainly not making any noise or running. And no, so there would have been a sniper. No chance, so yeah.
Now, there were some really good feel-good stories coming out of Shanghai. Kimi Antonelli, a new winner, and the second youngest Grand Prix winner ever. And then we also had the first Italian, well, he was the first Italian in 20 years to win a race. And then we had Lewis Hamilton on the podium for the first time in a Ferrari. When we met here early last year, we suggested that Antonelli had maybe been fast-tracked to F1 a bit too quickly. But in 12 months, he's come on strong. Has that been a surprise to you?
I think I was right when I said it was too early. I sat down with Alan McNish, who some of you might know, won Le Mans 3 times, twice with Audi, and raced for Toyota in Formula One, knows what he's talking about. And I said, part of his responsibilities at the Audi Formula One team now, and there are many, is the driver development program. So I said, would you have done what Toto did? And he said, there's no doubt it was too early. I would have waited a year. But Toto didn't expect Lewis to leave for Ferrari when he did. So they were slightly caught out by that. And then there was the choice, well, if we don't take Kimi now and we leave him for an extra year, then Kimi wouldn't have won on Sunday, because that would have been his second ever Grand Prix. So, probably wouldn't have done. So I can see that it's worked out okay. I mean, there's quite a lot of broken carbon fiber being distributed around the planet, and including in Australia. And actually, as part of the Kimi Antonelli story, if you think about it, last year there were splashes, weren't there? But it was pretty messy and wasn't good. And then Australia smashed the car to pieces in FP3. It's never a good thing to do. Actually, it's never a good thing to do, but certainly not in FP3. So just before qualifying. Did he finish second in the race?
Yeah.
Okay, but in the best car by half a second. I mean, so okay, recovered it. Good, And then the sprint race, he made a bad start. Okay, that's the car. But then he crashed into
Hadjar.
That's why we do this together. So I thought it was looking pretty messy again. And then he was lucky that George had the car problem in qualifying in Shanghai and started on the pole. And then he executed perfectly. And, okay, he did that thing where he locked up 4 laps from the end. I was sitting in the Mercedes motorhome between Kimi's dad on one side, who's mega, Giorgio, and George's manager, Harry, and his girlfriend, or partner. So it was quite tense I was in the middle. And what I loved about it, and I think is actually the signal to me that Kimi is the deal, the real deal, was that on that last lap, and having locked up 3 laps before and maybe throwing it away, coming out of that last hairpin, the penultimate corner, he lit up the rear tyres and slid the car. And it's the sort of thing, whenever I was in the lead of a race, I was just be very careful, don't breathe, hold your breath, kind of thing. And that lack of confidence, the confidence that 19-year-old has that, yeah, of course I'm going to do this. I'm about to win my first Grand Prix. So I thought that was a really good signal.
So going on to somebody who's old enough to be his dad.
Who, you?
Lewis Hamilton.
Oh, Lewis Hamilton. I should have stayed quiet. And not only then, Alan. Who? Lewis Hamilton? Yeah. Look, again, last year, Lewis was having these moments where it just wasn't. And again, I don't want to take, because it is slightly out of context. Lando didn't mean from the best cars to the worst. What he meant was, we've got problems with these current cars that we don't enjoy driving. He doesn't think ground effect F1 cars were the best, because they were nasty. And, you know, anyway, these cars are nicer to drive, and Lewis can do more with it. And I think also this kind of car probably slightly suits Lewis more than it does his teammate, Charles, slightly. And we're talking about, this, as we said last time, the sides of the 10th. Which side of the 10th of a second are you? The good side or the bad side? Because that's what makes a lot of difference now. And I think Lewis is thinking, I need to establish that I'm at least equal. Because last year he wasn't, wasn't he? So that's great. And you can see it, the energy in his... He's happy, and let's go. We could do something here. He's saying to the team, in the interviews last year, it was, I'm not good enough, generally, in various ways. Now he's saying, we've got a good car here, guys, but we need to push harder, because he can see they could win races. And they will. I think Lewis will win races and races.
Great. So a not-so-feel-good story is the continued plight of Aston Martin. Is this a case of you can pay for all the best ingredients, but that doesn't guarantee that your final dish will be very tasty? And did Aston Martin make a mistake jumping into bed with Honda? And so I asked a friend in London, you know, if he had any ideas for questions for today, and he came back and he said, "Is Adrian Newey's reputation and credibility now seriously damaged?"
Yes, in my opinion, yes. With me, yes, because I think, okay, the Honda people are taking responsibility and saying, we didn't communicate well enough, that we had some problems and we were trying to solve them, and so Aston Martin did find out too late, okay? To which I said, yeah, of course you did, because you're Japanese and you're Honda, and that's how you operate. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's part of, each culture's different. What makes Honda unbelievably good at making engines eventually and then dominate is that culture. And you can't say, I like that part of the culture, but not this part. You can't do that. We know that. So it's ridiculous for the Aston Martin people, whether it's Adrian, he's the team principal, he's been there for a year now, to not say, we got this wrong completely. It's not their fault, it's our fault. Because, as I said to a Japanese person over the weekend, look, I don't know what I'm doing in Japan, which is the first strength that I have. I've been going there long enough to know I don't know. Okay? So if you think you do know, that's the biggest problem. And I think the Anglo-Saxons have a tendency to think we know what we're doing. Number one. Number two, what I do know is, one day longer, one more beer, which made him laugh. It's true, right? And who's done business in Japan? Right. And it probably is the same for lots of other places, but I think particularly, you need to try and stay there a bit longer. You need to try and have that extra beer in the evening, if you're welcome, because somebody then might say, Matthew-san, that thing, whatever it is. So many times recently, and it's been happening, by the way, for the last 30 years I've been going to Japan, but I've only noticed it the last few, which is my point, right? It's that the real reason for the meeting, the most important topic, comes up is the last question or in the elevator or something like that. Now, if I know that, I'm not investing in a partnership with Honda. They should have known that. Adrian, of all people, should have known that because they had it with Red Bull. McLaren should have known it in the second generation. I often heard people around that project saying, oh, they're idiots. No, they're not idiots. You're not treating them the right way. You're not listening to what their problems are. You're not getting them to tell you the problems. Anyway, you get my point. I think they've really messed up, and I think Aston Martin takes full responsibility. And it'll come right, but they're going to lose this year and maybe next. And Fernando.
Well, it's pretty much going to be the end of his
if
career.
They're lucky, maybe Lance.
If they're lucky, yeah. But yeah, I mean, this is really... Alonso, he does seem to really know how to pick them, doesn't he? I mean...
Yeah. No, I was going to say maybe it's his fault. It's not.
Just wrong place, wrong time.
But I was saying to people, sarcastically, Fernando must be really disappointed. All those trips he made to Tokyo in the last 12 months to build the relationship with Honda and to hang out with the engineers. What are we talking about? He's never made any trips, has he? I said, I don't know, but I guess he hasn't. And I know Ayrton used to. And I know Michael would have done, Schumacher. So we've talked about this before. When Pirelli came into the sport, replacing Bridgestone, there were only 2 people that made contact with Pirelli, the new exclusive tyre supplier, only 2 before the championship started. One was Max Verstappen, whose idol was Michael Schumacher, and he was copying Michael. But of course, Michael always did things better than anybody else. Michael went to Pirelli and spent time with them. And so the Pirelli guys would listen to Michael more than anybody else. Logically, he had a relationship, and therefore, the tyres would be probably slightly developed better towards Michael's taste.
Right, okay. Well...
It's not difficult, Tim. Come on.
No, it's not. No. No, I've been banging my head against a brick wall in Japan for years.
There you go.
One of the big talking points in Shanghai, obviously, was the announcement we've cancelled 2 of the races in the Middle East. Now,
you say we. What did you play?
The sport.
Okay, just checking. It's a bit like these on-track activities.
Yeah. Okay. Now, it's probably a blessed relief as it allows teams like Aston Martin to do some work behind closed doors and maybe catch up a bit, and also allows people to catch their breath before heading to Miami in May, which is going to be the next race.
Hang on, no. So for the teams that are struggling, no, the last thing they need is to not be running. That's the problem. They can't. They need to run to find out. They need to run.
What about simulators?
Yeah, you can do a certain amount on the simulators, but you can't. I mean, they've got amazing rigs. I was at Mercedes recently and I saw the rig running. There was a car doing something. It was doing, I don't know which Grand Prix it was doing. It does it on its own, so they can check if the wishbone's going to break or the gearbox fails. But no, they need to be on track. That's how you solve these problems. What's good is for the humans, because this was the shortest break in F1 history between the end of Abu Dhabi 2025 Grand Prix and the shakedown at the end of January. So I saw a lot of people saying, to be honest, we're looking forward to April. They're calling it spring break because they're knackered. They've been working hard and had like 1 week off maybe at Christmas. And so for the humans, it's good, but for the cars, no.
And this is going to have a big impact on Formula One and revenues, because, these are the big paying races that they're losing. How is that sort of being met within the sport? Sponsors aren't getting it. Certain sponsors are having a really rough time this year. Aramco, they've got enough on their plate, domestically and with their car.
They're not using that much of their gasoline.
No.
The Aston Martins, are they? That's the upside, saving a bit of money on that. The Formula One revenue is $3.8 billion now, as I mentioned, through Tim's efforts at the FCC, roughly quarterly split. And the biggest part of that is TV revenue, and the second biggest part is race event hosting, and then the third part is partnerships, and the fourth part is what they call other licensing and hospitality and some bits and pieces, right? The race hosting fees are very important, and the 5 races that, if you like, are in I was going to say blast zone, that's the wrong thing to say, in the area around the troubles in the Middle East, the 4 Middle East races plus Azerbaijan contribute something like 25% of that quarter, rough quarter. So it's significant. The other side of that is all of those races have very long-term contracts. And the reason it's such a big proportion of that segment is that they're paying very, very high fees. And they've got long-term relationships with Formula One. So I don't expect Formula One is going to lose those fees this year. I think they'll work that out either through insurance or they'll extend the contracts even further than they already have. So I don't think there's an imminent problem. One thing that has been talked about in the paddock is, now for the first time ever in global sport, people are thinking maybe not a great idea to have an event of any kind in that area, because now we know what could happen. Once a missile hit the Crown Plaza in Dubai or whatever it was, oh, hang on. And it's target, isn't it? Remember the race in Jeddah when some people were firing missiles at an Aramco distillery down the road because it would appear on television.
Refinery, not distillery.
Yeah, quite a good point, actually. What I was saying about cultural understanding earlier on, Yeah. Why have I got distillery on the mind?
I don't know, right?
But that's the problem. So they were doing that then, but that was before people had been firing anyway. I think that's, maybe we might see more than 2 races not happen this year. That's the bigger challenge. So, yeah. In terms of the contracts with the sponsors, I think typically, they don't guarantee 24 because you don't need to. There's a certain number that will be a threshold. Typically, with COVID, the teams learned how to work with their partners to deliver the value in other ways. So I don't think that's a big problem.
Right. Mercedes provides the engines to 4 teams, but their own team are head and shoulders above everybody else, not just their customers. Engine suppliers are supposed to supply their customers with parity, equal equipment. So is it a question that just Mercedes have got the chassis right? I mean, McLaren can't have forgotten how to build a racing car inside a year. And is that massive gap going to remain? And are we in for a year of Mercedes total domination? At least both drivers can win.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest threat to our entertainment this year, is that, thank God for Ferrari doing a good job and taking a slightly different approach to their power unit such that they can get ahead at the start because they're running that, we all know this, that small turbocharger allows them to get ahead, but it's not delivering the ultimate power, so once the Mercedes gets up to speed, it can overtake again, but it's making the racing entertaining and it's holding the Mercs back a bit. I think at this point, it looks like George Russell and Mercedes will win because it's so they're half a second up on the Ferraris. So that and George should be able to beat Kimi most days because he's got so much more experience. So then in terms of the other teams, I think the point is that the Mercedes people from day one, from the day they started conceiving of their power unit, they've been working on how to optimize it. And they haven't held anything back from their teams, McLaren, Alpine, Williams, but it's different to developing it yourself in terms of what you're sharing and discussing. You come up with the figures and then you share them with McLaren, but if you're coming up with the figures, you're ahead of the curve. And the second part is, as they were developing the power unit, the engine, the battery, and all that stuff, how does it fit together? The chassis guys would have been saying, we'd like to do this with the aero, can you put the battery here, or can you do that? And there would be a two-way conversation. Whereas with the supply side, McLaren's waiting to get, and they would get regular updates, and those would change as the engine would change Mercedes, so that would, but it's different to having input that's listened to. So I think that's the biggest challenge, is Mercedes dominating this year.
Right, and it's going to be very difficult for even the customer teams to actually get on the front foot with them.
I think so, because Mercedes, it's not a surprise that they're at the front, because they're very good. They got it wrong in the ground effect era, but they were always good before that. So I think that's, yeah.
Now then, China, like every Grand Prix, it's complete sellout, impossible to get a ticket, and there's clearly been a huge surge in popularity in the sport over the last few years. And we've come a long way from the days when they'd bus in school children and off-duty soldiers to come and fill the grandstands. Now, I'm not sure where that figure of 221 million F1 fans in China actually, where it comes from or how it was reached. But it's an incredible figure for a country which has no F1 drivers and no major Chinese brands involved in a major way as sponsors or technology partners. I mean, has F1 now cracked China? Have they got it right, or is it just the start of something? Are we going to see another race in China? And do you think the talk of everybody's favourite car manufacturer, BYD, coming in, will they be building the dream?
They were there. Don't know what they were talking about, but they were there. Some senior people from BYD were at the Grand Prix. I think it's too quick. It's a bit like, F1 hasn't cracked America. It's somewhat, it's opened the door to America. And the Apple TV guys said recently, and they're now showing F1 broadcasts in the US, it's like, you think you've cracked America, trust us, you haven't, but this is the next step on that. And it's a bit like, the Grand Prix, as Tim said, it was sold out, has been, since COVID, it's been sold out. I was texting the race promoter saying, is there anything you can do to increase capacity next year? Because I'm fielding text messages from people saying, can you help me buy tickets? And I'd rather not have to do that. And he said, yeah, next year they're going to increase capacity even more. The Paddock Club was sold out, and other hospitality, which is great, which is all fantastic. On the other hand, it's a massive country, and this is, 120, 30,000 people in total? It's not actually that many people. I mean, it's great what it is. It's bigger than the other sporting events. The other thing is, downtown, you see a lot of people wearing particularly Ferrari or Mercedes caps, occasionally an Alpine cap or Fernando Alonso. I think anecdotes are quite powerful. A friend who speaks Chinese told me he was on the train. He saw a family that hadn't been at the racetrack, he thinks, because they had suitcases. Young son, about 8, on his phone saying, "Oh, Antonelli on pole," which, that's something. A friend who I took into the paddock on Saturday with his 10-year-old boy, because the 10-year-old is a fan, I ran around and scrounged a pass or two, and he said, "Oh, he's a big fan. And he had a Hamilton cap." But I started saying, "So do you know who that is?" "Ah, yeah, that's Esteban Ocon." Wow, he knew Ocon. He knew all of them, and I think it's starting to happen. And also they're enthusiastic, the fans there. A lot of people shouting "Toto, Toto" every time Toto comes into view, which is good, adds energy. And the other thing is, I would say 50-50 male-female. It's which other races we're now seeing it having shifted from 80%, 70, 60, whatever. But I think a pretty clear 50-50 female-male in China.
And they seem to be more knowledgeable and very enthusiastic. I mean, you saw, and they were divided amongst the different teams. I mean, there were loads of Hamilton fans there. And, it was
very enthusiastic.
quite an atmosphere, it seemed, down that main straight. And then, so is China going to get a second race? And I just want to come on to that really good article that you contributed to about whether there should be an F1 race on the Cotai Strip in Macau. You were against it, and I'm against it, and I think quite a few people who...
I wasn't against it. I was just saying it's a bit like Audi and we should talk about in a second, Audi and the MGUH. Well, it's just like, what's the point? So first of all, will China have a second Grand Prix? I don't think so. Why would, maybe, but it would, maybe, but I don't see an immediate reason. And there's so many other countries that want to have. What's the upside to Formula One of having a second Grand Prix in China when we've already got a good one, compared to having one, let's say, in Seoul, Korea, or Bangkok, Thailand? I think that would be much better for Formula One. So that's the first thing. Second thing is, Macau has a Grand Prix. How old is it? 73 years old, Nikki? 73. Nikki, who's been running the PR for the Macau Grand Prix for the last... She looks much younger than she's been doing it. Despite doing it for that many years, she looks that young. They've got a Grand Prix. If they just activated that Grand Prix for, I would say, 1/10 of a Formula One race cost, maybe less, they could achieve 30, 40, 50% of the value of a Formula One Grand Prix. So they've already got the asset, they just need to use it. So that was what I was saying. It was like, yeah, have an F1 race if you want, but, those sorts of people that were saying it love to say, we should have a Grand Prix. They're talking complete nonsense.
Right. Okay, now you mentioned there about Audi, and we got 2 new manufacturers this year in Audi and Cadillac. I mean, how important is it to get the manufacturers involved? And is it them who are forcing the change to things like 50-50 conventional electric power split? And are there concerns that, we're going to have a repeat of what we had earlier this century of they all withdraw at the first sign of a recession? And how do you think they're both doing? I mean, 2 races in.
Counting the questions that you were giving me there. I was just counting the questions.
Well, I like to... Yeah, that means I can take a break now.
What was the first question? No. Are they... So, okay, so I spent some... I've already dropped the name of Alan McNish. I spoke to Alan about... So who in the room here thinks we should still have... Sorry, stop. Who knows what an MGUH is? Okay. It's... Who cares? Exactly. None of us care. But it was actually quite an important part. It was the generator that went in the exhaust pipe. So as the exhaust gases flowed through, it spun a generator, and it was part of the thing that charged the batteries in the car. Most people didn't know the F1 cars were hybrid, 80-20, and again, didn't care. And they don't today, and it's 50-50. But when Audi wanted to come into the sport, when Audi was being courted to come into the sport, Audi and Porsche, they said, we'd like to come into the sport, but one of the things we think is irrelevant for practical use is the MGUH. It's wonderful for motor racing, for various reasons I can get into, but it's not relevant. Not today anyway. But the point they were saying is, why do motor manufacturers want to spend all this money developing this technology, which is only going to be used in an F1 car? And this was in 2022. The regulations of 2026 were being written then, and it was a completely different world, wasn't it? Formula One's decision to go in the 50-50 hybrid direction was about commercial survival. It was existential threat from EVs. Everybody was saying, Audi, I think, said, kind of coincidentally, but other manufacturers are saying it, we won't be making internal combustion engines in 2030. So you had to have a Formula One, if it was going to exist, that wasn't just internal combustion. You needed to have a hero statistic. We are the hybrid technology. So, you know, people blaming Audi now forget the fact that at that time, they didn't force anybody's hand. They just said, look, we think this. On the other hand, by the way, the Audi guys were saying, why don't we regenerate energy from the front axle? It's the more efficient one to regenerate energy from. And the other teams didn't want it because Audi's been doing that in sports car racing for years. In the same way they were saying, oh, Audi don't want the MGUH, the generator and the exhaust, because they haven't done it before. Audi developed four-wheel drive in rally and won the championship. Audi took diesel engines, of all things, to Le Mans and won it. They were the first guys to win Le Mans in a hybrid car. They know how to develop technology. So I think the problem that, like the Max Verstappen thing is, I understand Max's criticism, and he should be making it because we need criticism. You know, this is sort of democratic in a sense, right? He needs to say these cars aren't good fun to drive because they're not, and it's correct him to say that. But the problem, but Max, did you want to have Formula One today? Because if F1 hadn't done that and the world had gone in the direction they thought it was going to go, F1 would be seriously compromised.
Let's just talk about him for a moment. I mean, he's gone from being the pantomime villain to being the sort of mature elder statesman who puts across the view that many people have. I mean, is that a widely held?
Well, it wasn't pantomime, was it?
Yeah, well.
It was more villain than pantomime. I think Max was the villain of the piece, and quite often. We've talked about that before. And it's divisive, but he was, you know, his racing antics were right up against the line and often, in my view, over it. But last year, I think he went from being villain to hero, because we saw this guy who was the best on the track, not prepared to give up, doing unbelievable things, and almost won the World Championship. Very close. And put McLaren under pressure, so much so that they started tripping over themselves and almost lost it. And who's seen the Ford video that he did with, it's fantastic. You've got to look at it. It's on YouTube. And you watch that and you're going to be a Max Verstappen fan. Proper racer, loves cars, good bloke. It's with Chris Harris, thank you. Chris Harris. You watch it. Chris is the right guy to do it. Perfect. So by the end of last year, Max Verstappen is hero. And that's been a good transformation.
Right, let's throw this open to the floor. Anybody got any questions they want to put to our F1 guru? Out on the veranda there. We'll bring you a microphone.
So you mentioned Mercedes and their customer teams. Ferrari obviously have 3 customer teams as well. Is it only the engine that's homologated, or do the customers choose to have a larger or smaller turbo? Do they have to have the small turbo?
Oh, yeah, the whole thing is, it's a package that comes.
And are they going to pay a price in Mexico where there's no air?
Good point.
That's a good question. But isn't the smaller turbocharger better isn't it? Smaller, I think. We've stolen your microphone, so you can't answer back now.
Well, we did say we weren't going to get too technical and not use acronyms.
What did I say?
Talking about the benefits of smaller turbochargers. Okay. Right. Anything else to add to that? No. Next one. Yes. Okay. Yeah.
On the Max Verstappen and maybe looking backwards slightly question, we heard in the second half of last season that McLaren they're all focused on next year. That's what's giving Max the chance to come back. Well, I watched. I was interested to see how this development that McLaren was doing last year, how that happened, but I haven't seen it yet. So in fact, literally, it happened at all. So what actually happened last year did McLaren just completely give up, stop doing anything? But did they do the wrong thing? I mean, because it seems like they've lost it completely, and there was a story that they lost it last year for a reason.
Oh, I see. Okay, so what we're talking about is there's a restriction on the development time that teams have in the wind tunnels and on the computers as a way, first of all, to stop profligate spending, but secondly, actually, that restriction depends on where you sit in the World Championship. So it's a way of leveling, it's like the NFL draw, but and the idea was McLaren were going to win, and they did. They won the World Constructors' Championship twice in a year, so they're being somewhat starved of development time, the idea that somebody else will catch up. And because Red Bull have only fielded one car properly the last couple of years, they've tended to be third in the championship or whatever. Okay, so I think there's 2 parts. That's the first part, what you're referring to. I don't think McLaren's nowhere at the moment. I think McLaren has the third best car. They chose not to start them in Shanghai. Right, well, the cars chose not to start. So that's why it looks like. And, and in Australia, Oscar Piastri crashed going to the grid, unfortunately. And then Lando's race was a bit messy, but he was there, wasn't he? Somewhere fifth or something. So I think McLaren's going to be fine. And we've got that problem of catching up with the factory team, but I think they'll be the third fastest team. I think they'll be okay.
Yes.
How angry is Carlos Sainz and Alex Albon with the 2026 Williams?
You can only imagine, right? I mean,
They've got the budget. They said 2026 was going to be their year.
Yeah.
Not good.
It's a little bit. It's a sort of version of the Aston Martin story, which is that by now it's not acceptable to turn up late with a heavy car, which is their car's overweight. That's where, as you know, Mike, that's where the performance seems to be. And I think the problems that Williams will say, and it's correct, that there's a lack of investment in the team over many years that meant that their systems of operation, of design and manufacture fell behind the curve, and they've been investing in upgrading and improving, and certainly they have. But then you say, well, yeah, but what about Haas, who never had those systems in the first place, which might be an advantage to some degree, or Alpine, which had the same degradation and worse, you probably say, and they haven't had the uplift yet properly. So I think, and they've got two great drivers at Williams, two of the fastest guys on the grid. Sainz could have gone to Audi. I think I'm optimistic about Williams because they have got a proper structure in place. This is a very difficult endeavour, which is why it's great when you win, and you're up against people like, Daimler Chrysler with Mercedes and the group behind Ferrari and so on. I was at their commercial office in London. This is a change. Their commercial office in London on Tottenham Court Road is 125 people in the commercial department. A Formula One team used to be, when Mike started following, was about 12 people in the whole team or whatever. They didn't have a commercial department. So they're serious about what they're doing. I think they'll get there. It's just this year's a bit messy at the start.
Philip, on the balcony.
Thank you. Ferrari brought the Macarena wing to Shanghai but elected not to use it. Is it a red herring that they're just trying to get other teams to look at, waste development money and time on? Or is it actually performance benefit? And we'll see it come out later.
I love that question. Thanks, Philip. And for those that don't know, that one of the functions or features of the cars this year is that the wings flatten on the straights, both front and rear, to reduce drag. And the Ferrari, different ways. Some people pivot it off the front end of the wing, and some pivot it off the back end of the wing, and Ferrari pivot it in the middle, and it kind of rotates like a rotisserie.
Or Macarena. Can you show us how to do
I don't know what
that?
the Macarena is. Philip, can you just demonstrate for us the Macarena? Thank you. There you go. They've tested it a few times. They're saying they're going to bring it to Suzuka. They might use it. I don't think they wouldn't, as you know very well, and that's a good question, they wouldn't spend 1 minute on something they weren't really going to use. It's a lot of money, and as we said earlier, development time and money is restricted. So they definitely think it's got some potential. And looks good as well. What I said actually jokingly to somebody was, it's because at one point when they showed it on the broadcast, it flipped and the IBM logo was upside down. So I'm in a chat group of commercial people in the sport and said, what does IBM think about that? And I said, well, it's obviously a distraction from the fact that the HP logo makes the car look disgusting. And it's one of the biggest aberrations in Formula One is that HP have insisted on having their logo in blue on a Ferrari, and so we have to keep coming up with ridiculous suggestions that they're running it because of in 1960, John Surtees won the World Championship and something. What? Just run the logo in white on the red. Or don't run the logo. Martini in 1970 sponsored Porsche at Le Mans. When you see the cars, they're the most beautiful cars because Martini had confidence in their brand, that the car was beautiful colour, and then just down at the bottom it said Martini. And we remember and respect that. So I suspect I'm not going to get invited to any parties from the HP leadership, but there you go. I was surprised they're still in business, actually. Anyway, moving on.
Moving on. Yes, over here.
Hello. I saw a stat from the Australia Grand Prix where I think it was the Ferraris are gaining maybe 0.6 seconds on the corners, and on the straight, the grunt of the Mercedes was making about a second, on top of that. Obviously, we have Suzuka coming up, which is very famous for its curves, a flowing race. Do you think that will be beneficial to Ferrari? And I think it's a more corner-dependent circuit. Is that enough to overcome potentially the grunt of the Mercedes?
It's a good question. That's one of the things we're certainly going to see is that different circuits will, we knew that going in, we knew Melbourne was going to be the one that was worse for these regulations, unfortunately, in terms of not having those moments when you could recharge the battery. I think the bigger challenge at Suzuka is going to be, it's all about fast corners. And that's the biggest problem with the current regulations, I think, is we're seeing cars running out of energy on the straights. That's kind of okay on the straights, right? But if they're not anymore going flat through those S's or flat out through 130R, because, well, they are going flat out, the foot's to the floor, but there's
no energy.
There's no energy, then that's a problem. And that's a problem I think we face at the moment. And I don't know whether it really benefits Ferrari. I can imagine it will benefit them at a circuit where coming out of slower corners like Monaco would be beneficial, but I'm not sure about Suzuka really.
Yes.
Thank you. Linked to the question he asked, could you talk a little bit about the tracks? Because the Shanghai track looked really quite smooth the way and had that long straight. But it would be interesting to get your views on the tracks.
In what? In terms of what?
How they flow and which ones you think are working well. Because I understand there's one German guy that's designing all the new ones.
Yeah, the Tilke company.
Yeah, that's right.
Been doing circuits for a long time. I mean, I personally like Shanghai. I like the Tilke circuits. It's a little bit like this whole discussion about the regulations. Tilke circuits, blah, blah, blah. And then people, oh, okay. And then it becomes a problem. I don't think it is a problem. I think he does.
It's all about time, isn't it? After a while, they become a classic, like Istanbul. Everybody thinks that's now a classic.
But it was a great racetrack. And
yeah,
so is Sepang.
but when it started, it was another Tilkedrome.
That's it, and it was never a Tilkedrome. It was a race. And by the way, the guy used to race at the Nürburgring, so you shouldn't ever get any criticism, ever. End of story. Thank you. Next.
Any further questions?
Zach.
Yes, Zach.
All the drivers and teams tend to say it's part of motor racing, but is there any discussion or dislike of the jeopardy that the safety car brings or red flag brings in terms of cheap pit stops or free tyre changes? And if there is discussion, I may have a solution to be discussed.
Oh, well, tell us the solution as part of the question.
Okay, so understand that under a red flag, you change your tyres, you get a free one because of safety concerns. So my solution would be, if you pit under a safety car or red flag and change your tyres, fine, but it doesn't count towards one of your mandatory stops.
Okay. Wish I hadn't asked that question now. Here's the point. We're going to get more safety cars this year than before, because as we've already seen, because the cars are a bit more unreliable. There's things that go wrong. George was talking before the race about what happened to him in qualifying, and he said, well, I heard something as I was going out the pits, so I commented on the radio and waited for instructions. He's got that lovely accent. He was waiting for instructions, and he said, and then the car started. I didn't touch anything. It started, so I thought, oh, okay, and put it in gear. And he didn't know why it started, and he drove round. So he said, we've still got a long way to go in fully understanding these cars. They seem to be somewhat autonomous, as my words now. But I think that, we're going to have more safety cars. We're going to have more jeopardy. We're going to need, for the teams are going to need, to your point, to be a bit more alive to making decisions on the hoof, which is a problem for Ferrari, because we've seen that. When I ask the question every year, I'm saying, well, what's the problem with Ferrari? We saw it in Australia. There was a safety car. They didn't pit. Why? It was obvious they should have pitted. And I think it goes back to our communication topic, is that two parts is there's a fear of making mistakes. That's the biggest issue. As we know, they get, the media will crucify them if they get it wrong. So if there's a consensus about how to do the race before the race, and then something happens at the last minute and you decide to go risky, you think you're going to make a mistake. So I don't think, so the answer to your question is no, I don't think it's a problem. I think it's part of racing, and it's, good and bad.
Yes, at the front here.
That's just sparked one thing on to continue the safety car VSC thing. In Formula 2, GP2, F2, you can't pit under a VSC. It's not in the rules, but you can in F1. The aim of the VSC is to neutralise the race. But whenever there's a VSC, the only thing it doesn't do is neutralise the race, because someone is either advantaged or disadvantaged, whether they've pitted or not. Has anyone ever given you a reason what this discrepancy between F2 and F1 is? Because it seems quite confusing. It works in the lower formula, but in the F1 you can still do it.
I have no idea.
So you can have a meeting with
I'm going to write it down.
Symbiosis or whatever his name is.
Yeah, I'll ask somebody.
I'd like to attend that meeting.
I'll come back to you. Thank you for your comments, sir.
And just one thing I've got. The statistic that was thrown out in quite a few newspapers about, Formula One startup, Cadillac, advertised for 600 jobs and got 145,000 applications. I mean, that was pretty staggering. I mean, and probably quite impressive for a startup of any business.
Yeah.
Goldman Sachs doesn't get that many people applying for internships.
No?
I don't think so.
Well, there you go. As you might imagine, I get approached from people who say, what do you think, how can I get into the sport? And I always say the same thing, which is start in Formula 3 or start in sports car racing or start in go-kart racing, because it's so many people want to work in Formula 1 at every level. Of course they do. It's a very glamorous occupation and so on. So I often say try and do something else to start with, because then you're the person that isn't coming in and saying, I love
It's a job.
Yeah, exactly. The Cadillac team is just one example. And I'm fascinated to see how it works out, Cadillac, because they've got a problem, I think, which is that they've got the headquarters is in Silverstone, the cars being built in different parts and being built in different places. The engines are in the future going to be built in North Carolina, I think. They've got a headquarters in Indianapolis where they're putting people moving home and so on. I think that's quite a lot of background noise for going motor racing. I think they should have kept it more streamlined. But yeah, if you want to go and work for Cadillac, you probably need to move to Indianapolis. But apart from that,
stay in Milton Keynes.
Milton Keynes, yeah.
Right, we've got time for one more. We had, yes, again, a repeat one. Very enthusiastic on the veranda.
You mentioned pantomime villains earlier. So obviously, Christian Horner, is he coming back, or is Toto going to throw money at the problem?
Is who going to throw money?
Toto.
Oh, you mean Lawrence Stroll, don't you mean?
No, Alpine.
Yeah. Oh, I see. Okay. I don't think anybody really knows. I think Christian wants to. I think he's been working very hard on it. That's the sort of consensus. I don't know the answer to whether he is or isn't. I don't think anybody knows at this point. But I think what was interesting about, and it's part of the Drive to Survive phenomenon, right, is I was watching that with my wife and daughter and the Drive to Survive thing. And Christian, they know the background of him, and also pre the scandal part of the text messages, he was always somebody who was a little bit more caustic, in the fight with Lewis in 2021, you always felt with him he was pushing the boundaries of things rather more than the Mercedes guys. And then all that scandal stuff wasn't good for him. But when you watch that episode, when I watched the episode with, and who's seen the episode where Christian gets fired? I was like, yeah, okay. My daughter kept saying, oh, I feel bad for him now. And I said, well, yeah, so do I, actually, because the thing was, he didn't get fired because of the scandal. He didn't get fired because he'd done a bad job. He got fired because somebody else wanted to be in charge. And like a lot happens in the business world, he was an executive that had got a greater and greater powerful role, but didn't own the company, and therefore at some point somebody got a knife out and stabbed him in the back. And as we saw at the beginning of the year, he wasn't wrong about Red Bull powertrains. Now I know at the moment the car's not looking good, it's not working perfectly, but they created their own power unit system, and it was in testing, it was impressively good. I mean, I thought they were going to be shocking. So, let's be fair. The guy's incredible leader, built an amazing team, went through various ups and downs, and got fired unfairly. I mean, yeah. So I don't know if he's coming back. I wouldn't if I was him. I think he's had his best years, and he should do something else. But we do. You're right. For the show. Yeah, good point. Yeah, he should come back. You're right.
On that resounding note of a vote of confidence in Mr. Horner, and we'll probably see him around. It's time that we bring this to a close. Matthew, as always,
Thank you.
it's been great having you here. We look forward to welcoming you back in a few months' time. Ladies and gentlemen, Matthew Marsh.
Thanks for coming.
And as always, I mean, I think you've got an FCC tea set now.
They've given me a beer mug this time.
Oh, right.
Thank you.
All right. Matthew, thanks a lot.
Thanks very much.
Cheers.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for
Thank you.
coming.